Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We will begin. Hello, and welcome to our 13th edition of Impulse Talks, live from Paris. We are glad to have you with us today to talk about Industry 4.0. As you are now aware of, our ambition at Impulse Partners, and especially with our Impulse Talk session, is really to provide a national overview of innovation and how tech is developing in construction and beyond. Every 2 months now, we are featuring some of the best startups, along with testimonies from corporate leaders and perspectives from venture capital investors, covering topics as smart city, digital construction, and as it is the case today, Industry 4.0. A gentle reminder to please turn off your microphones and cameras to make the session run as smoothly as possible. Of course, if you will be a speaker, do not hesitate to turn it on when your slot will come. For your information, the session is being recorded. Before introducing our speakers for today, I will tell you a few words about Impulse Partners. At Impulse, we are passionate about innovation in construction, smart cities, and industry. We know these are of the some biggest sectors in the world, but they remain largely under-optimized today because they are highly fragmented, ruled by local regulations, and also unable to globally address the environmental and productivity challenges. We are convinced that there is a huge opportunity for innovation and entrepreneurship in those fields, and that they can help reshape the industry and improve efficiency and sustainability. Our role, all of us, and especially the actors that you will hear about today, is to help detect the most promising startups and to connect them with the market. We act as a third party and a facilitator between corporate players, some of them who are with us today, startups, the same goes for them, and investors. That's also the case for you guys. So we work with many of the largest names and industry leaders in our focus sectors, and we have helped accelerate more than 700 startups in their go-to-market. Part of our job is to bring people together across the value chain and across geographies. This is exactly what we will be doing today, considering how diverse the audience is. Indeed, as you can see, around 40 participants have registered for the session: corporate leaders in materials, engineering firms, contractors, real estate, and venture capital firms. We are glad to gather people from all over the world on such an interesting topic. Just last thing before you start, you have received a link that will link you to a questionnaire in the last email you have received, I think, 15 minutes ago, and you can see the QR code also. It's really just to have really an insight on the session from you and to improve our webinars. So do not hesitate to fill it, and the same goes for you at the end if you want to be put in contact with the speakers. I will now leave the floor to Jérôme, manager at Impulse Partners and specialist in the Industry 4.0 subject, who will tell you a few words about our team today.
Thank you very much, Zineb. So a few words about the topic of today, Industry 4.0. Industry is facing global challenges on digitalization, optimization, low carbon, and energy transition. Those challenges are synonyms of huge opportunities for innovation and entrepreneurs. Innovation solutions are aiming to transform the industry to Industry 4.0 through many use cases. Next slide, please. As I'm not going to go through each of one, we have listed several use cases or ways the industry can be improved on this slide. So you can look at this slide and see many use cases, very interesting to explore for innovation and entrepreneurs going through Industry 4.0. We are convinced that all the key players in the industry have the responsibility to evaluate the potential for transformation, and Impulse's goal is to support those transformations. So next slide, please. So to support this transformation and coming up today, we will have the pleasure to hear from Chantal Bottelin from TotalEnergies and the company's initiative regarding low carbon thematics such as Rainbow Project. Then we will hear use cases presentation of 4 entrepreneurs from the UK, Netherlands, Spain, and Finland. We also hear Jan Borgstädt from Joint Capital, who will present the venture activities in the Industry 4.0. And to close the session, we will have a few minutes at the end dedicated to Q&A. Please do not hesitate to use the chat to type your question. Without further ado, let's start the 13th edition of Impulse Talks dedicated to Industry 4.0. And Chantal, I leave you the floor to present the Rainbow Project.
Thank you, Jérôme. Thank you, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I have a huge cold, a big cold, so maybe it will be difficult to understand what I'm saying. Don't hesitate to interrupt me. So today I'm going to talk to you about the project Rainbow, which is about leveraging digital transformation for decarbonization of our activities and products. Next slide. So why Project Rainbow? At TotalEnergies, just like in other hard to abate industry, we have a climate ambition, which is a net zero ambition by 2050, with different intermediary ambitions, as it shows on the left-hand side. That's on one hand what we have as an ambition, and the second ambition is the digital transformation of our company. We expect to save $1.5 billion per year starting in 2025 using digital tools. In the value creation areas that we have identified at refining and chemicals, we have, as you can see, planning, scheduling, and other operational excellence axis, but we also have health, safety, environment, energy efficiency, and greenhouse gases reduction. And so far we have let's say less than 15 projects, digital projects related to greenhouse gases reduction. So we told ourselves internally at refining and chemicals that we could leverage the collective intelligence to find more digital use cases to develop a digital roadmap for decarbonization. Next slide. Just a focus on what we call scopes in what we define as our scopes for refining and chemicals. I don't know if you are familiar with this when it comes to greenhouse gases emissions. Scope 1 is really the emissions stemming out of our production processes. Scope 2 is represent the emissions stemming from the utilities we are purchasing, especially electricity and heat. And Scope 3 is represent the emissions from the use of our products by our clients. That's roughly the way we define it at refining and chemicals, and at TotalEnergies level. Next slide. Okay, maybe it will talk to some of you, and maybe not to many of you. But these are the greenhouse gases reduction levels at RNC. Basically, what we are going to implement in order to reduce our carbon footprint. What shall I say? The first column represents the levels on Scope 1 and 2, so our operations and utilities. The second column is on our business, so it represents Scope 3. And the third one, which is the last one, but not the least one, represent the carbon culture that you need to encourage when you deal with decarbonization of your activities and products. So I will go through the first one, scope 1 and 2. We are, of course, we are having, in general, we have 280 projects at refining and chemicals related to decarbonization of our activities, scope 1 and 2. We have carbon capture and storage projects. We have green electricity, and I don't know if you understand what is green electricity, but if you buy some on a private point of view, you probably know what it means for an industry. Energy efficiency, of course, if you consume less energy, you emit less CO2. We electrify our processes, so replacing turbines, for example, rotating equipments powered by gas. We replace them by electricity, for example. We use low carbon fuels instead of highly carbonated gas and fuels. We are using and producing green hydrogen in our processes. We valorize waste heat with the vicinities, with the towns surrounding our sites, and of course we have a lot of influence on the flaring of our units, and we have operational excellence, and we tell ourselves that digital could help across these levels. On scope 3, there are a lot of things we can do to reduce our scope 3. Biofuels, for example, you probably use SP98 and SP95 gas for your car if it's not electric. We are embarking into e-fuels, which is the production of fuels based on CO2. We developed a lot of lightweight polymers, biopolymers, of course, biosourced and biodegradable polymers, and we are recycling standard plastics into recycled plastics. Next slide, please. Maybe I will skip this one because you probably know it by heart. Yes, exactly. Let's go through this one. Next slide. Okay. We are using, in terms of, okay, I'm working at the innovation division of refining and chemicals at TotalEnergies. So as I told you, we are going to leverage the collective intelligence of our colleagues to develop this digital roadmap. And for that to happen, we are using an approach which is called DKCP, Definition, Knowledge, Concept, Proposal, because it's an appropriate methodology to tackle the unknown. So basically, there are 4 steps in this methodology. First of all, you define your topic, which we did a long time ago. You gather all the knowledge you can on the topic. So in our case, we did an internal survey of all the digital projects related to CO2 emissions. And we are currently doing a state-of-the-art, an external state-of-the-art by visiting startups, meeting with peers, a lot of business intelligence, and a call for project, which is going to emerge in a few weeks. In the concept phase, that's when we are going to brainstorm about disruptive concepts, about disruptive use cases, which is a challenge because what we identified so far is that we have 15 use cases, and there are very little additional ones on the market so far. And the proposal phase will be about developing the digital roadmap, as I explained to you, the deliverable of this project. It will then be handed over to our TotalEnergies digital factory for development, for implementation. Next slide. Do I have time? No, I don't think so. So we'll stop here.
Yes, of course. Do not hesitate to conclude if you want. You have a few minutes left.
Thank you. So I don't know if some of you are interested to exchange on our project and on the topic, using the digital transformation to decarbonize activities and products. I will be more than happy to exchange with you, but this is an extract of what we found so far. It's not complete. It dates from the beginning of the week. So what the foundation for scope 1 and 2 is to monitor in real time CO2 emissions and to be able to run diagnosis and forecasting and benchmarking. It's really the foundation to have something that operators can supervise and influence. The second use case is the use of drones for CO2 measurement. We have a project ongoing here at TotalEnergies. A small one, which is the remote collaboration. It helps reduce the flights from one side to another by using a video conference technologies between on-field workers and experts. Flaring, we have an RTFLD project going on, which is going to be implemented in Antwerp, real-time flare loss detection and monitoring. In terms of energy efficiency, it's very classical. It's not a new subject, and we do 1% of decrease every year. I'm going to skip these ones. Regarding products, of course, it's a little bit like knowing your CO2 emissions on scope 1 and 2. On scope 3, you need to know your life cycle analysis. And we have a project about the traceability of recycled plastics from the feedstock to the customer. Do I have some time left?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
1 minute, let's say.
Okay. Perfect. On the external state of the art, we have a lot of information about operational excellence and especially unexpected shutdowns, which will probably talk to a lot of you. We have identified a use case, which is computer vision for quality control, the thickness monitoring, and cross-functional monitoring of all assets. Generally speaking, digital twin. We have process control optimization and simulation, and it's very close to what we say in terms of CO2 emissions reporting and diagnosis and forecasting. We have, regarding carbon capture and storage, we identified the monitoring of CO2 purity after the capture. And e-fuel, we need to trace CO2 as a feedstock to new applications like e-fuel. Okay, I think I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chantal. It was really insightful. And then now we can begin the startups use case presentations with Michael, who will present us Cambridge Carbon Capture. Thank you, Michael, for being with us.
Hello. Hi, I'm Michael Evans, CEO of Cambridge Carbon Capture, and I'm here today to tell you about our CO2 lock technology. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. No, back one. That's it. Yeah, so we're developing a technology that permanently locks away CO2 and forms it into a commercially viable solid mineral material called magnesium carbonate. We also produce a number of other byproducts, including critical metals like nickel and cobalt and silica, all really important for the rollout of EV technologies and renewables in general. We've got a granted international patent, and our unique selling points for our technology is that we capture and permanently sequester the CO2. It's there forever. We're talking millennia rather than 100 years or so. We also can do it and generate profits, which makes us very different from a lot of our peers. We can also do it at a gigaton scale, and the byproducts that we produce displace other carbon intensive alternatives, so there's additional carbon savings to be had there. And importantly, we don't need pipelines or CO2 storage sites in order to make our technology work. Next slide, please. So the opportunity is that in all the IPCC reports that have been published, there is a very large part to play for carbon capture and storage and utilisation technologies. These are significant quantities of CO2 that are going to need to be captured and stored, we offer quite a unique proposition. Next slide, please. Yes, so many of the competing technologies to ours involve carbon capture and storage. This is the main industrial sort of solution that's been explored. But this requires very expensive infrastructure. It's very energy intensive to capture CO2, but then also transport it and store it. Then this needs to be monitored over a period of millennia potentially. And there's no commercial benefit from this, so it's all cost. There are technologies that are looking to utilise the CO2 that's captured, and some of these do produce other products, and similar to us, these do offset the cost of capture, but not to the extent that ours does. It basically just about covers the cost in the best case. So some of these products are restricted by the size of the markets for the byproducts, particularly in the chemical sector. And some of these options that are involving making fuels, for instance, cannot really be considered as a sort of a carbon capture technology because they're re-released through the use of the fuel. Next slide, please. So this is our technology. It's a two-stage process. I always start with stage 2 because this is where we actually capture the CO2. We can also capture NOx and SOx and H2S as well, incidentally. And we do this using a magnesium hydroxide feedstock and standard scrubbing technologies that you're probably all familiar with, involving scrubbing using slurries, etc. And the CO2 is captured as a magnesium carbonate, which can then be dried and used as a construction material. It can be used as base chemicals in various other products as well. But for stage 2 to operate and to operate on a sort of an economic level, we need vast quantities of magnesium hydroxide at a low price. And this is where stage 1 comes in. So our patented technology enables us to digest magnesium silicates, and some 50 to 80% of the Earth's crust is made from magnesium silicates, so very abundant materials. And often they're found in mining tailings and asbestos waste and various other sort of waste products that we can utilise. So our digestion process splits off the magnesium to form magnesium hydroxide, and we can also recover silica. But interestingly, we can also remove metals, and some of these metals are really, really important metals for the rollout of EVs and renewables generally. Materials like nickel and cobalt, for instance, are hugely environmentally impactful to process using existing technologies, we offer a potential for making these metals available in a sustainable way. Next slide, please. But most important thing, certainly from a business point of view, is that we can do all this and actually make significant profits per ton of CO2. So using our techno-economic analysis that we've done on our process, we're predicting profits, net profits of around £300. That's probably about €350 per ton of CO2 we capture, as opposed to a cost. And now costs are sort of being tracked up to sort of 100 to 600 euros is the predicted carbon price in the future. Next slide, please. So many use cases. The obvious one is stripping CO2 from industrial emissions. We're also looking at conversion of natural gas to what's now known as blue hydrogen. Conversion, cracking of methane to form hydrogen and CO2. We can remove the CO2, displacing other quite energy intensive processes like pressure swing reactors, etc. We're also looking at cleaning up gases, particularly interested in biogas, because often that contains CO2 and hydrogen sulfide, which is an unpleasant smell that you get with biogases. We can strip all those out and permanently sequester those. Also, interestingly, actually, the production of metals could actually be a particularly good business for us, particularly nickel, where we can actually access new minerals that are currently inaccessible because the technology is not there to extract it economically. And another thing that's quite interesting nowadays is we've now got contracts with the UK government to look at direct air capture using our technology, and this is going to be more and more important as we move forward. Next slide, please. Yes, so we've got some good traction. We're currently waiting on the results on some applications for grants to enable us to do a pilot plant of our stage 2 process. This will be with a tile manufacturer in the UK. We're working with HOSIM to convert the materials that are produced from the captured CO2 into construction materials, and we hope to build something from that. That'd be rather special, I think. We have industrial partners to help us with that. We've got scrubbing expertise. We've got engineering partners to help with the engineering side of the pilots. We've got another project that's ongoing involving the UK government, where we're looking at direct air capture. We're currently doing a feasibility study on a 50 kiloton plant based in Merseyside, and it's looking quite hopeful that we're going to get phase 2, which would be a £3 million pilot, again completely paid for by the UK government. Next slide, please. So, in summary, Cambridge Carbon Capture's got a circular economy solution to climate change. And this is going to be really important for Industry 4.0, because it's all about resource efficiency and bringing industries together to collaborate to create these sorts of circular economies, and we do just that. Our technology is easy to deploy. It's a profitable route to permanent carbon capture. We have the benefit of creating other valuable byproducts, saving further emissions. We've got strong market demand and a rapidly accelerating interest from governments and industry, and we have a strong patent position, offering significant USPs over competing technologies. With that, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your presentation. We have one first question on the chat from -Apolline from Saint-Gobain Ventures, who's asking, can you comment on the energy requirements for the conversion of Mg silicate to MgOH2, and also what sort of chemicals and reagents are needed?
Well, I can't tell you what chemicals and reagents they are, because that's you need to be under an NDA for that. So sorry about that. But in terms of life cycle, we've worked out that for every physical ton of CO2 we capture, we emit around 300 kilograms of CO2, but that's based on using fossil fuel derived heat and electricity. When you look at possibility of using renewables, that comes right down to about 180 kilograms. So there's a good net advantage in doing that.
Okay, thank you so much. And we have another question from Steve Biter, who's asking, and what are the economics of stage 1 and stage 2 as independent processes?
Right, well, we make all our money in stage 1. Stage 2 is basically, I mean, in terms of our business model, we will be owning plant to deliver the stage 1 process. Stage 2 is going to be licensed to the CO2 emitters, and all the scrubbing plant, etc., will be owned by them. The magnesium carbonate that's produced will be owned by the emitter and will be sold to the construction sector by the emitter. So we won't have anything to do with that in reality. So in the end, we are going to be a project development company. So we intend to set up special purpose vehicles around the world, specifically aimed at deploying this technology around different sites with their own infrastructure and circular economy collaboratory partners for each specific project.
Thank you, and thank you for this question from Aix-en-Mumbai. Another question from Vincent Ruinet, who's asking, what are the most promising use cases for your technology among the one you presented?
Well, I mean, the most promising one is the capturing of industrial emissions. Obviously, with all the commitments at COP26, industry is focused very strongly now on reducing their own emissions, as was illustrated by the talk from Total. This is a big market opportunity for us. It's only going to get bigger as we get more desperate, as it becomes apparent that we're not hitting the targets, which is likely to be the case. So, interest is accelerating. We on a weekly basis, I get inquiries from VCs from around the world. It's a full-time job just keeping on top of it all, to be honest. But first come, first serve, as they say. So if there's any investors out there, please come and speak to me.
Thank you for your response. Are there any other questions? Another one from Pattering. Can you comment on CO2 concentration required?
All right. Well, interestingly, I mean, this is something that we've only recently sort of innovated into existence. Is that we can actually capture CO2 directly from the air. The profit margins are still pretty impressive. It does drop slightly to about £200 per tonne of CO2 we capture, but it's looking very promising indeed. So we can go right down to 0.04% and right up to 100%. So we've demonstrated all those different concentrations.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. And for the audience, do not hesitate to contact us. If you want to be put in contact with Cambridge Carbon Capture, we will be more than happy to put you in contact with Michael and his team. So now I'll welcome Frank, who will present us COVAL Energy. Thank you so much, Frank.
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Frank Schreurs, co-founder of COVAL Energy, and I'm very excited to be here today to present you our sustainable aviation fuel technology called GAFT. Next slide, please. The airline sector is one of the hardest sectors to abate CO2 emissions because it's extremely difficult to use batteries and hydrogen or other gases for other than niche applications. You need a new supply chain, new engines, but mainly because the weight and size of the required energy to fly is much bigger for batteries and gases than it is for liquid fuels. Biofuels are the most realistic alternative for liquid fossil fuels. They are already used today to fly airplanes, but a large feedstock shortage is expected right once demand starts increasing in 2030. Next slide, please. And the leading way to produce these sustainable aviation fuels today is to use fatty acids, such as used cooking oil or virgin cooking oils. And these acids are energy carriers that are treated with hydrogen to make these sustainable aviation fuels. And that's already happening today. it's at a commercial scale. Many companies are building these plants to produce these sustainable aviation fuels out of fatty acids. But to meet the nearby emission cut obligations, we need 4 times as much of these used cooking oils and other waste oils than are available. So how are we going to deliver that? Next slide, please. Our solution to this has 2 steps. First of all, we use renewable electricity to directly convert non-fossil CO2 and water into a new energy carrier. Then this energy carrier is fermented to fatty acids. And fermentation is a conventional process as used in, for example, brewing beer. The innovation is that instead of sugar and yeast, we use our energy carrier and a proprietary microorganism to make our fatty acid product. Next slide, please. Our fatty acid has at least a 20% higher value than used cooking oils for 3 important reasons. 1, our feedstocks are abundant and we produce a uniform quality. So no more supply shortages and pre-cleaning of dirty used oils. Number 2, we don't use any fossil fuels and we don't compete with food, either directly or indirectly. And we can produce on site, so no more global sourcing and supply. That's number 3 actually. And we recycle our CO2 to new fatty acids. And this makes together that we have a better CO2 footprint. Next slide, please. So on competitors, well, in a way, we don't compete directly with them, with these less advanced producers of sustainable aviation fuels. We actually help the best current technology that is available to be more sustainable and more competitive in the long term. Actually, Total is also having a few refineries converting to these HVO plants that we hope to supply. Next slide. Our team is at the core of the innovation. We have the expertise to convert CO2 to energy carriers, and we really know everything about fermentation processes. Together, we have a truly unique solution. We understand extremely well what our future customer needs, as we have the relevant industry background. Basically, we all have a background in the oil market, energy markets, food, and come from disciplines such as R&D, marketing, at corporates, but also as an entrepreneur. Next slide, please. We started in 2014 and have achieved a lot. We've got a working process and have attracted half of the funding for a pilot plant. We need approximately 2.5 years to our first revenue. And we're using this time to improve our process to use as little electricity as possible to make the best fatty acids. This includes upgrading our patented electrolyzer to a 3rd generation that will be stackable, cheaper to build, and with less operating cost. Next slide, please. From the start, we believed that we needed to partner to tackle all these challenges that climate change brings. They're just too big. And our partners believe the same. They rely on us to develop and deliver CO2 conversion technology. Together, we enjoy close to 10 million euros in grant funding. Next slide, please. Our first focus is to complete our pilot plant. In the meantime, we're gathering support letters from industry players, and we are in discussion with our first customer now. We expect our first license revenues to come in 2024, and they should be sufficient to finance our runway to a commercial plant later this decade. Next slide. Our value proposition is clear. We will produce a more sustainable and valuable feedstock. We make current HVO producers more competitive in the long term, and we increase their feedstock supply flexibility. Next slide, please. We are COVAL Energy, and from the start in 2014, we see CO2 not as a waste, but as a valuable resource. Next slide. Please, next slide, please. Well, thank you very much. This is our team. So that was actually on the previous slide, but anyway, I'm open to any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Frank. Does anyone have any questions in the audience? You can write them down on the chat, or really just turn on your micro. And of course, we'll have the time at the end to ask questions and answer them if anyone can have any. And in the meantime, before listening to the rest of the startups use case presentations, I'll just give the floor to Jan, who will present us Joint Capital. Normally he will share his own slides. So thank you so much, Jan, for being with us.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, and you see me too?
Yes, we do.
Okay. I think maybe it's easiest you share my slides because I tried, but I cannot use the share tray, or
No
maybe you need
problem.
to change my rights. Then I maybe can do
You'll
it.
see them in a few moments.
Okay, cool. So yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity. I'll just start while figuring out our details. So I'm Jan. I'm one of the founding partners of Joint Capital. We quite early in 2015 already focused on investments in software that is to be used in the industrial use cases. Okay. All right. So are you sharing now? Yes, you are.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so basically we call it the Neue Industry. It developed, the concept developed a bit. Basically we said it's digitally empowered assets, and now lately, and I'm sorry, this deck is a bit outdated, I just realized, we said, well, the Neue Industry needs to also be decarbonized. So basically one depends on the other. Because without a decarbonized industry, you won't have any industry anymore. And if it's not digital, you'll probably not be able to measure and manage the decarbonization. So it kind of fits into each other. And if we go on the next slide, it's all these technologies that our companies use. Just to give you a bit of perspective, so we're an early stage fund. We invest 1 to 4 million euros into startups, and all what I've heard so far is super interesting. Even though, and I must be disappointing at this point, we try to look for software companies that solve these problems. So we've already invested in a company that internalizes the cost of emissions and lets you optimize your procurement accordingly. Helps you. It's actually a French company called DataPred. Lets you optimize also the timing when you want to buy emission certificates. So we're more looking for software solutions, but the two previous pitches really made me feel very good about European entrepreneurs and what we're able to achieve. And so it does seem that the future is not lost yet. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah. Basically what we are seeing in the industry, and that's also what I heard from Total, is that the world becomes more and more complex. Everything is real time, and the ESG requirements on top add to complexity. So I think there's no question in anyone's mind that as much as possible, and we just heard it from Total, will be dealt with autonomously. And basically, we're looking for software companies that help large companies achieve this. So we're only investing in B2B software companies that help larger companies achieve their goals. And please go on. One more slide. And basically, we've been seeing, in our view, we've seen 3 waves of this movement. And what you will see is that if it affects your product and your business model, and if you read this chart from left to right, I think it's too much to cope with now in 10 minutes. But basically what we're seeing is that business models are developing from the customer paying for the unit. Now more and more you have pay per use, and in the future you will have pay per outcome. So basically the provider will take the risk. So if we look at the previous pitches, basically you would not just pay for the ton of CO2, but you will also pay for the risk that it's not captured. Yeah, all these other concepts I think are at this point a bit too detailed. Let me just go into the next slide so I can ask a bit what we're looking for, and then a bit what we're offering. So as a Berlin and London-based venture investor, we're looking on the one side for cool founders who are building the next wave of software companies, but on the other side, we're also looking for partnerships with companies just like Total, who is actually looking for innovations to reach their goals. So I think we saw on Total's slide that not all innovations that will be necessary to reach these goals will be developed internally. So obviously there's a lot of room to work with startups, and what we've been developing here is that early on, already in our due diligence, before investing in a company, actually, we're exposing them to potential customers. So we count around 185 companies in our network that we engage with. Not all of them at the same time, but per company, usually that we do due diligence on 5 to 7 companies. And our goal is actually, before we invest, to already have identified a couple of lighthouse customers for our portfolio companies. So if you are interested to get exposure to our portfolio and to know which company could help you achieve your goals, please drop me an email. Later in the presentation, there's also my email address, and I'll repeat it right after. Let's just go one more slide. So this is the team. We're small. We've done one fund is invested. We're now raising the second fund. So if here are potential investors that want to invest into the new industry, as I said, it's digital and it's decarbonized. If you're interested in that, I'm happy to talk as well. We've got 100 different investors, many family offices, many corporates, and many family-owned businesses. Actually, most of our investors are family-owned businesses. Next slide, please. Yeah, so that's the team again. A bit boring here, sorry. Next slide. Yeah, this is just a couple of examples of companies that we invest in. So one company, IP Rally, just to give you a bit of feeling, helps you manage your IP. Yeah, make sure you're not infringing any other IP. RioCube is a technology to deal with the simulation of liquids. So Total, for example, could be a perfect client. We've got similar companies. Basically, you can simulate outside the lab with high performance computing. PhotoNow, I heard today also about quality inspections. So PhotoNow is a visual inspection tool that lets large companies make sure they have the right quality. And Frenetic is all about electrical engineering, but this is too much detail. Altogether, we have invested in about 20 companies. Please go on. Okay, again, if there's a founder here and he needs access to Germany, we're the people that should back you. As said, we're looking for software mostly, but there's always exceptions to the rule, and we're happy to help. We're entrepreneurs ourselves, and even though it might not be the right fit, if you feel like you see me on LinkedIn as being a person that's connected to the person you're looking for, I'm happy to help. But basically, this is our offering. We invest all over Europe. And make sure you find some lighthouse customers in the German industry, which, as we all know, is quite strong. And then in the next step, we help you fundraise further funds to go global. Next slide, please. Yeah. So here's my my email address. Philip, who's not with us today, it's also on this slide. So it's very simple. Jan, J-N. That's my first name.
We need to teach many frogs to find the.
I'm sorry. Oops. I'll just finish. So my email address is jan@join.capital. So
and my presentation is probably missing. Or is it so?
Someone speaking. So basically that's it. I'm very much looking forward to receiving emails. And if again, reach out on LinkedIn if I can do anything for you. Again, we're investors in the new industry. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jan. Sorry, I don't know who was talking when you pronounced your email address. Thank you for this presentation. Does anyone have some question for Jan? Because fortunately he has to leave, so do not hesitate. I think Chantal from TotalEnergies is saying that you should talk, and I'm also sure of that. We can't hear you. You turned off your microphone, I think, Jan.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're so right. Yeah, Chantal, happy to speak. I saw 4 or 5 use cases already on your slides that we'd be happy to help you with.
Thank you, Jan.
All right, let's keep more time for the next speakers. I'll be listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Okay, I'll let Selma share her screen so that we can say another time thank you to Frank and welcome Jordi, who will present to us Smartive.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jordi Cosidó, CEO and co-founder of Smartive. First slide, please. So I'm going to present the state of the art and also on the market solution for monitoring wind turbines. Next slide. We are targeting the main issue is maintenance and operations. So most of you might be aware that the downtime cost extends and increases over the years of life, and what we aim to next slide is to provide through a digital platform. Next slide, please. A traceable solution that can provide better transparency on the failures, anticipate or diagnose early stage failures, and finally increase the operation, the efficiency, and reduce the cost regarding to inspections and downtimes because of unexpected failures. We are using that platform on more than 1,500 turbines worldwide. And what we see is that we can also contribute on the life increase of the turbine. Next slide. The platform is named Cosmos, and it's composed by 3 different modules. Next slide, please. The very first is a standard SCADA, which allows also fault-tolerant control in terms of regulation of the active power. The second layer is the data analytics solution, in which all the algorithms are introduced. Talking about artificial intelligence, IoT collection, text mining for working orders, and many others. And the third module is based on the performance analytics in order to optimize certain parameters to finally contribute to more efficient turbines. Next slide, please. In terms of data analytics and algorithms, we are on the state of the art. We also published 5 different scientific papers this year, coming from a PhD in collaboration with Fraunhofer. So we have explored supervised, unsupervised analysis, text mining, and many others, from machine learning to deep learning. And what we come up with, the next slide, is with a unique solution that can be set up in less than a week. So we can set up about 400 turbines in 11 wind farms in less than a week. And next slide, what we provide is a unique ensemble learning solution. Next slide, please. That what it does is identifies the failure in between 3 weeks to 3 months, depending on the component, for detecting that early stage failure. Next slide, please. So most of important of the which algorithm we are using, also we need to provide a very comprehensive and intuitive platform in order to be to be a drive to drive action on the operators. So next slide, what we try to is to combine artificial intelligence with standard representation of data, like time series comparing a regression modeling with the actual value of a parameter, scatter plots comparing different turbines, or anomalies in a 3D analysis, or even heat maps for the different algorithms. So what we provide is a whole the whole turbine analysis, including drivetrain, PGO, and even tower and blades, without introducing any additional sensor, with a setup of 1 week. And now on the next slide, it's my pleasure to introduce a business case that we studied last year with 2 of our clients. It was about 687 turbines worldwide from different OEMs located in 11 different countries, 25 wind farms. And what we found out is that we could, considering false positive and fault detection and true detection. Next slide, we can contribute on savings up to 861,000 euros, and for the projections for one fleet of 100 wind turbines of 2 megawatts in 20 years, the impact of the platform is 5 million euros. The platform is already on the market. We do have also developments going on in terms of improving the analytics, improving the user experience. But now we are scaling up our solution, and we aim to find new customers, new clients for moving towards the digitalization of the wind. So thank you very much, and if there's any question, I will be glad to respond.
Thank you so much, Jordi. Does anyone have some questions? Of course, as always, do not hesitate to write them down on the chat or just activate your microphone. We also have time at the end. Thanks again. And in the meantime, I will welcome Petri for the final use case presentation, and Petri will present us Soletair Power.
Yeah, hi, my name is Petri Laakso and I'm the CEO at Soletair Power. And we make carbon capture slightly different than others. So we want to make buildings as carbon sinks, because buildings are responsible for 40% of the CO2 emissions in the world. And by capturing the CO2 from building ventilation, we can turn people more productive in offices, and then we can utilize that CO2 into something like valuable products, fuels or other base chemicals. Next slide, please. Our company is founded in 2016, and we got a seed funding in 2019 and 2021, altogether 1.5 million from a company called Wärtsilä, which is a global leader in ship engines and power plants all over the world. We have 7 patents, and 1 is already approved also in US. And yeah, we've been featured in many different kinds of medias and gaining some traction also on the sales side. Next slide, please. So the CO2 level in the atmosphere is getting higher, and it's affecting the nature. So it's also affecting us people. And if we look at scientific data here on the left, we can see that the indoor CO2 is proven to reduce the cognitive function of people by 20% by every 400 ppm increase in the air. This study is from Harvard in US. NASA has made similar studies, and many other institutes also. So it means that when the indoor CO2 is higher, we people are not as wise as we could be, and we want to change this. So the next slide, please. And how we do it in the building ventilation, because the air is already moving, so we should just capture the CO2 away, because in many buildings in the world there is already air moving, and CO2 is just waiting to be captured away. We can do like 50% negative emissions in a building, meaning that we halve the CO2 emissions in a building when you utilize the CO2 in a proper way. We can sell this as a service for the companies operating in buildings with the cost of a coffee cup so $1 to $2 a day per working day per employee, or we can sell the equipment as an investment for the building owner, for example. And then we can turn that CO2 into fuels, for example, utilizing electrolyzers and different synthesis processes. Next slide, please. So we do different kinds of products also in addition to the building integration. So we can also do outdoor capture, like the number 2 in the top right corner, containerized solution for outdoor capture. Then the number 3 is the indoor unit capturing in a single room in a building. That doesn't make permanent CO2 capture, it will vent out the CO2. We can do a permanent capture with that one also, but then it needs a lot of piping in buildings, which is not feasible or even economically viable. And then we can do complete power to X systems also, specially made for customers like what we did in this number 4 for Wärtsilä in the Dubai World Expo. People can go and see it every day there in the Dubai. Next slide, please. So there are other companies also capturing CO2 directly from air, but for example, Climeworks, Global Thermostat, and COVAL Engineering are doing it large scale outdoors. We are concentrating in the building ventilation to capture CO2, and what we are selling the best indoor air for companies. And then there's Enverid and Skytree also doing pretty similar what we are doing, but the Enverid and Skytree cannot capture it in pure form in their normal setup. Of course, one competitor for us is that please open the window. Well, in high-rise buildings, that's not possible. Or if there's high temperature outdoors or really cold, or there's a really polluted air in outdoor environment. Next slide, please. And yeah, the sales models I already told that we sell the equipment as such or as a service model. And here is on the right, you can see that in Tokyo, we could capture huge amounts of CO2 from all the offices there, just one city only, and produce synthetic methane for the gas grid there locally. Next slide, please. Well, the team is quite experienced. Several different startups were made previously, and we are really committed to solve this problem. Next slide, please. So I'll thank you for your time. My 5 minutes is up, and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Petri. Once again, if anyone has some questions, do not hesitate to ask them. Thank you. Finally, I would like really to thank every one of our guests for the very complete introduction of TotalEnergies and Joint Capital, and thanks to all the startups for their presentation. Our next talk will take place on January 22nd and will be focused on smart city. The following one, dedicated to digital construction, will take place on March. I will, of course, send you all the presentation slides by email. You'll have the contacts of the startups if you wanted to contact them. You'll have here the QR code to indicate us if you want to be put in contact. And just now we'll take a few moments for the questions and really the discussions. Do not hesitate to activate your microphone, to type down your questions on the chat. I think we have one here from Thomas. Okay, how many buildings with your tech installed? Do you have?
Yeah, it was probably for me to answer. So Soletair Power is just building our first installation for buildings here in Finland. The Dubai unit was the first commercial that we sold for the Dubai World Expo. We are delivering one unit to Germany, and we are going to announce the next sales quite soon. So we are quite on the early stages, but things seems to be gearing up.
Thank you. And good luck. Okay, so
one question for Jordi Cusido. Are you in touch with TotalEnergies?
We did some small service on 2019 with Quadran, one you acquired in one wind farm. But was just a report. We are not actually in touch with Total.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Otherwise, if there are no more questions, thanks a lot for today, and see you all in January for our 14th edition of Impulse Talks, which will be dedicated to Smart City. Thank you so much for attending, and do not hesitate to contact us for any more information. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.